The push to clear homeless encampments in Washington, D.C. and other cities raises the question whether mentally ill should be involuntarily committed for treatment. President Trump has ordered federal agencies to make it easier to forcibly hospitalize the mentally ill and drug-addicted people for longer periods of time. Supporters say the moves will help restore public order. Others say people will be unjustly locked away. So, Tara, should we make it easier to commit people against their will, especially given a history of mass institutionalization?
No, we should not. It really should be the means of last resort to deal with someone who has a mental illness or who has a drug addiction. Part of the problem is that is a very short-term fix for a much bigger, much larger problem. And part of the problem for the mentally ill is most people don't know anything about what happens once the person is arrested or taken into a facility. So they don't know whether or not the person gets more than a couple of weeks to a couple of months of treatment and then is right back on the street. Is there a post-care facility for that person to go into? What happens in the post-care facility? So really just the notion of, okay, we want them off the streets, so we will house them somewhere where supposedly they will get treatment. Hopefully that's what happens, but more often than not, that is not what happens.
We do have a moral imperative to do something. It's always troubling to watch how we, as a society, not as individually, just sort of walk by people who are strewn out in the street, just sort of lying there. So I believe we have to do something, and obviously whatever they're dealing with is beyond their control. I sort of lean toward Tara's view that we have to be careful because historically in the US we have a tendency toward criminalization of things like drug addiction and mental health to a lesser extent. And so I'm considering our very first venture into this at the federal level in 1970. There, the government had a choice to either leave enforcement of that drug law to the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare or to the Attorney General under the Department of Justice, and the choice was made to go with criminal enforcement. And so we have to try to think of other ways to not criminalize this population, but it's difficult. I mean, it's extremely difficult.
And we are, to be clear, we're talking about people who have been deemed to be a risk to either themselves or to others. We're not talking about just any person who happens to be homeless, let's say, on the street.
Yes, well, and you're absolutely right about that. The thing is, often people who are homeless, and I don't want to sort of, paint everybody with a broad brush, but often the homelessness is connected to mental health issues, and the mental health issues are often worsened by drug addiction. So they're very much interconnected. And I just don't see where we're going to be able to avoid the institutionalization that you asked about without doing it very conscientiously.
Well, are we even prepared to handle if we had to institutionalize more people, Anirban?
No, I don't think we are able to handle that level of mass institutionalization. Thankfully, though, the Supreme Court had said that you cannot criminalize drug addiction. This is an old California case. The name of the case escapes my mind. I agree with my colleagues here, right? Without a predetermined post-care infrastructure and apparatus, where there is genuine political will and as to what these people would do, it's tantamount to kind of this institutionalized cruelty, right? You are like basically you lock the door, you throw away the key because you think there's someone in my head. That's not me, to quote Pink Floyd. And what will happen is this mass incarceration, institutionalization of people into these kind of cells from where it's not very sure when are they going to get out, what would happen when they are going to get out, if they are going to get out and be in the same situation. And the most alarming part of all this is that a lot of people who don't have shelter, they call DC a home. You might call Syracuse a home, but you just don't have shelter. That can happen to anyone, happen to me, happen to anyone. But more importantly, a disproportionate number of people are veterans. They have fought America's wars. And for some reason, the PTSD, lack of job opportunities, they end up not having a permanent shelter. So what this kind of policy would do is also kind of shoehorn them into these kind of cells from where it's not very sure what happens after that. You can't indefinitely keep people in these places. And regarding involuntary commitment, it depends, right? Who is that person? If that person has a legal guardian or a person who takes care of it, it can be done in those ways. Other than that, I do think this is a terrible idea to just snap up people and put them in jail without any plan whatsoever.
Yeah, I would agree with you. There has to be a plan. And certainly if we consider New York, which is in many ways leading the way here, after wrangling back and forth on what the provisions of the last budget should include, it was decided that the police would not pick up the person off of the street and escort them to the hospital, but rather an ambulance. But it is what happens next and for the foreseeable future that is most concerning. But for me, it comes down to who's going to pay for it and where's the money going to come from? Because right now, New York pays $115,000 per year for prisoners. And certainly that much or more would be needed to care for these individuals. Where is that going to come from? And so we will likely end up with just the worst care.
Well, with the president issuing an executive order about this, he's also been slashing money for mental health services.
And social safety nets and so on. So on the one hand, you're cutting off these social safety nets that actually help people to stay out of the streets, have some level of nutritional assistance and so on. A lot of people would lose their Medicare benefits. And then you're saying that, oh, your presence, very presence in a place which also belongs to you is a problem to me. I don't want to see you. Hence, I want to delete you from my space of vision. That's just cruel.
Well, people are fed up with homeless disorder, you might say, public drug use. So this could certainly resonate with people, I think.
Yeah.
It absolutely will resonate with people. Part of the problem is they like the idea of finding a space for these individuals. They like the idea of finding treatment for them. But as you pointed out, part of the problem is the cost of all of this, which we don't like. The other problem is the NIMBY. I love the idea of a group home. I love the idea of a facility that's residential and gives them some open space, et cetera, but not in my backyard.
Right.
Yeah, but I come down here. This is a good start. It's a good start. Whatever his motives are, we have to do something because as a society, we've ignored it up until this point.